The hour before sunrise at Stonebridge Correctional Facility was a stretch of time that seemed immune to the rhythm of the outside world. Inside these walls, the air vibrated with a silent tension, every surface bathed in the harsh glow of buzzing fluorescent lights. Shadows stretched long and thin across the concrete floors, and the clang of distant doors echoed off the cinder block, bouncing up to the metal rafters where a solitary, flickering bulb threatened to go out. Outside, a heavy fog rolled across the yard, swallowing up the razor-wire fences, shrouding the guard towers in ghostly gray. Even the ever-present sound of the highway beyond the perimeter seemed muffled, as if the world itself held its breath for what was to come. Rachel Turner sat on the edge of her cot, knees drawn tight to her chest. The thin prison blanket draped over her shoulders was no defense against the cold, but Rachel barely noticed. In her trembling hands, she clutched a faded photograph. Her daughter Emma as a young girl, grinning from atop a sturdy brown horse with a white blaze down his nose. The word Dakota was printed in Emma's careful childhood script along the bottom. Rachel's thumbs traced the edges of the picture, over and over, until the corners threatened to tear. Her cellmate, an older woman with cropped gray hair, watched quietly from the opposite bunk. She had seen many condemned prisoners in her time, but there was something different about Rachel. A certain stubborn light still burned behind Rachel's eyes, refusing to be snuffed out by the system, by injustice, or even by time itself. At exactly 5:30 a.m., the cell block's loudspeaker crackled to life. The warden's voice, flat but forceful, filled every cell at once. "This is Warden Sheffield. Tonight at midnight, by order of the state, the sentence of Rachel Turner will be carried out." A hush fell over the entire block. Someone cursed under their breath. Rachel pressed the photo tighter to her chest, willing her hands to stop shaking. Minutes later, the heavy door groaned open. A guard, Officer Webb, whose eyes rarely met the gaze of inmates, stepped into the cell. He closed the door gently behind him, unusually respectful in his approach. In his gloved hands, he held a small notepad. "Rachel," he said, voice rough, "the warden wants to know if you have a last wish. Anything, within reason." Rachel swallowed hard. She knew what was expected: a special meal, a favorite song, maybe a final letter. But when she looked down at the photograph, her decision was immediate. "I want to see Dakota again," she said, her voice steady. "My horse. Just one last time before—" Webb hesitated. "Your horse?" "Yes," Rachel insisted. "Emma can bring him. Please. That's my wish." He scribbled in the notepad, glancing up, clearly thrown. "I'll pass it along." After he left, the cell was quiet again, except for Rachel's breathing. For a moment she doubted herself. Would they ever grant such a wish? Did anyone care what a dying woman wanted? Down the hall, guards gathered in the break room, murmuring in disbelief. "A horse? On prison grounds? She can't be serious," one scoffed. Another shook his head. "If it were me, I'd ask for a steak dinner. Maybe she's lost her mind." But Webb relayed the message to Warden Sheffield, who stared at the request, eyebrows arched in surprise. "She wants her horse? Jesus, that's a first." For a moment, the warden considered denying it outright. But then he saw the lines in Rachel's file. Model inmate, mother, teacher before her conviction. There was nothing in the handbook forbidding such a visit, though it was, by all accounts, unprecedented. "She'll have her wish," Sheffield said finally. "Let's see what comes of it." As dawn broke over Stonebridge, Emma Turner sat at her kitchen table, mug of cold coffee in hand, staring at the phone. The previous night she'd stayed up late in the barn, brushing Dakota's coat, trying to make sense of a world that would let her mother die for a crime she didn't commit. Dakota, older now and flecked with gray, had pressed his head into her shoulder, his warm breath fogging in the chilly air. There was something different about him, an uneasiness that Emma couldn't shake. Maybe he sensed what was coming. The phone rang, startling Emma so much she nearly dropped her mug. She grabbed it, fingers trembling. "Miss Turner?" It was Webb. "Your mother's requested to see Dakota. Today. Before tonight." Emma's heart pounded in her chest. She looked out the window at Dakota, who was pacing the fence line. "I'll bring him," she said, voice thick. "We'll be there." After hanging up, Emma rushed to the barn, the bridle clutched in her fist. Dakota nickered softly, stepping forward to meet her. As she slid the halter over his head, Emma noticed how thin he'd gotten, how his breath rattled a little when he exhaled. She pressed her face into his neck. "You have to be strong, boy. For Mom. For me." Back at the prison, guards debated logistics, unsure whether the warden's decision was a stroke of compassion or lunacy. One younger officer asked, "What if the horse freaks out? What if the inmates riot?" But the warden waved him off. "Let's try to grant a dying woman's last request. If it brings her peace, maybe we all could use some of that." Meanwhile, Rachel waited. Every minute felt like an eternity. In the quiet of her cell, she whispered to the photo, "Hold on, Emma. Please bring him. Let me see his eyes one more time." The wheels of fate, once set in motion, refused to stop. As the sun crept higher, a battered pickup and horse trailer rumbled through the fog toward Stonebridge. Emma drove, her knuckles white on the wheel, Dakota shifting anxiously in the trailer behind her. She had no idea what would happen when they arrived, only that she would fight for her mother and her horse until the very end. And in the hollow halls of Stonebridge, word spread. A condemned woman's final wish would bring a horse onto prison grounds. No one could have guessed it would be the spark that set off a chain of events destined to change everything. Thunderheads rolled low over the hills as the convoy made its way up the gravel drive to Stonebridge Correctional's visitor barn. The storm was almost cinematic in its timing. Dark clouds heavy with unshed rain, the first stray drops dotting the windshield as Emma eased her truck to a stop. She could feel Dakota shifting nervously behind her in the trailer, his hooves thudding, the anxious snorts echoing like distant thunder. A correctional officer stood by the barn doors, clipboard in hand, eyes wide at the sight of a horse on prison grounds. "Turner?" he called, voice uncertain, as if he still didn't quite believe what he was seeing. Emma just nodded, her lips pressed in a line, not trusting herself to speak. She unclipped Dakota's lead and guided him out. The old gelding shook his mane, nostrils flaring at the unfamiliar smells. Disinfectant, rubber gloves, sweat, and fear. Inside, the barn had been hastily cleared, every sharp object removed, guards posted at the entrance and exit. Metal bars divided the space, creating a kind of temporary paddock. The only sound was the relentless hum of overhead lights, and faintly, the sizzle of approaching rain on the tin roof. When Rachel was led in, the world seemed to slow to a crawl. She shuffled in leg irons, two guards at her side, head bowed. But as she entered the barn and saw Dakota, she stumbled, the strength going out of her knees. One guard caught her, steadying her with a rough hand on her arm, but Rachel barely felt it. She looked up, blinking away tears, and for a second, she looked just like the woman in Emma's photograph. Determined, hopeful, alive. Dakota let out a sharp, anxious whinny, pawing at the concrete as Emma led him forward. He pressed his head against the bars separating him from Rachel, ears pricked, eyes searching her face as if he could hardly believe she was real. Rachel knelt down, despite the chains, hands reaching through the bars. "Hey, boy," she whispered, her voice breaking on the words. "It's really you." Emma, for a moment, felt like she was witnessing something private, sacred. She stepped back, swallowing hard. A guard passed her a small stool, and Emma sat, knuckles white around Dakota's bridle. Rachel buried her face in Dakota's mane, her shoulders shaking. The first real tears she'd let fall in years spilled onto his coat. Dakota pushed harder against the bars, lips fumbling for her shirt, her hands, anything that felt familiar. He let out another low nicker, so soft and mournful that Emma felt her own eyes sting. No one spoke. Even the guards, hardened, usually indifferent, stood silent, watching this reunion with an odd, uneasy reverence. Then something strange happened. Dakota kept nosing at Rachel's vest, the one she'd worn at every show, every long trail ride. He pushed at the pocket insistently, then woofed and nudged harder, almost frantic. At first, Rachel just stroked his cheek, but Dakota wouldn't let up. He began to nip at the fabric, tossing his head, hooves clattering against the floor. Rachel looked up, startled. "What's wrong, boy? What are you trying to say?" Emma moved closer, her brow furrowed. "He never does this, Mom. Not unless something's wrong." A guard shifted uneasily, glancing at his watch. "Ma'am, we need to—" "Wait," Emma said, raising her hand. "Let them have a minute." Rachel reached into the vest's pocket and found nothing. Just lint and an old show ribbon, faded nearly white. But Dakota kept at it, nostrils flaring, eyes locked on Rachel's every move. His urgency was contagious. Rachel suddenly remembered something. The vest had once held her old stopwatch, a keepsake from the eventing days, the only one she'd ever trusted. He's looking for something," Rachel murmured. "But what?" Dakota's agitation grew. He stomped, knocking over the water bucket a guard had set out. The clang jolted everyone. A nervous officer reached for his radio, but Emma put herself between Dakota and the bars, holding out her hands. "He's okay," she insisted. "He's just trying to tell us something." The moment stretched, charged with a strange electricity. The rain hammered on the roof, a flash of lightning illuminating the whole barn for a split second. Emma stared at Dakota, heart racing. Then she noticed something glinting in the torn lining of the vest, a bit of frayed leather, barely visible. Rachel followed Emma's gaze and turned the vest inside out. From the lining, a small, broken watch band fell to the floor, the leather worn, the clasp half snapped off. Emma stared. "That's... Mom, is that—" Rachel nodded, fingers trembling. "It's from the night—" She never finished. A guard cleared his throat, visibly uncomfortable. "I'm sorry, but time's almost up." Emma looked at her mother, then at Dakota. The old gelding pressed his nose into Rachel's hand one last time, then let out a long, shaky breath. Rachel leaned into the bars, her voice fierce now. "Listen, Emma. There's something we're missing. Dakota remembers. He's trying to help us. Don't give up, baby. Not yet." Emma nodded, eyes brimming. "I won't, I swear." Dakota snorted and tossed his head, a final plea as the guards separated them. Rachel turned as they led her away, meeting Emma's eyes through the blur of tears and iron bars. In that look, a promise passed between them. Hope wouldn't die here. Not if they had anything to do with it. As the barn doors clanged shut and the rain battered the roof, Emma hugged Dakota's neck, whispering to him, "We're not done, boy. Not by a long shot." The guards herded everyone out, but the story of the condemned woman and her horse had already begun to ripple through the prison. No one would sleep easily that night, least of all the ones who'd come to believe that maybe, just maybe, the horse knew something everyone else had missed. The storm broke by morning, leaving behind puddles in the paddocks and a lingering hush that blanketed the world outside Emma's ranch. Sunlight pierced the receding clouds, painting everything gold and silver, but the weight in Emma's chest didn't lift. She stood by Dakota's stall, one hand absently stroking the horse's graying muzzle as he nibbled a half-hearted breakfast of oats. His movements were slower today, every breath just a little more labored. Emma leaned against the rough wooden beam, eyes drifting to the old halter that hung on the wall. Its leather was cracked with age, but she remembered when it was new, the day Rachel had bought it, laughing as Dakota, still a colt, bucked and pranced around the paddock. Those were simpler times, when the world hadn't yet turned upside down. Dakota lifted his head, nudging Emma's shoulder. She offered him a carrot, but he only sniffed it, then rested his chin on her arm as if seeking comfort. Emma swallowed hard, thinking of last night at Stonebridge, the way Dakota had acted in the barn, so desperate, so certain. That moment kept replaying in her mind, looping over and over. Dakota nosing Rachel's vest, the torn watchband, the look in Rachel's eyes as the guards led her away. What did it mean? Outside, the grass sparkled with dew. Emma took the old halter from its hook, fingers running along the nameplate. "Dakota," she whispered. "You always know, don't you?" Her mind drifted back to the fire, the night everything changed. She was 13, terrified, awakened by smoke and the wild, screaming whinny of a horse in panic. The barn had been an inferno, flames chewing through the rafters, hay smoldering, animals shrieking. Rachel had run straight in, no hesitation, dodging falling beams and bursts of sparks. She'd found Dakota, then just a yearling, trapped behind a collapsed stall door. The memory was vivid. Rachel grabbing a pitchfork, smashing wood and shouting encouragement. Dakota fighting to get free. Both of them emerging, coughing, singed, alive. Rachel's arms had been blistered for weeks. But after that night, something unbreakable had forged between mother, daughter, and horse. Dakota bore a scar across his flank, a pale line in the brown fur, and Rachel never let anyone forget how he'd saved a child as the flames raged. The bond was more than love. It was survival. It was a promise. Now, in the quiet of morning, Emma traced that old scar with gentle fingers. "You remember the fire, don't you, boy?" Dakota's ear flicked, and he leaned into her touch, eyes soft and wise. She thought about Rachel's trauma, the nightmares that had followed, the way her mother sometimes stared off into space when sirens wailed in the distance or thunder cracked overhead. Emma understood now what she hadn't as a child, how much Rachel had suffered, how hard she'd fought to keep going. Dakota had always been Rachel's anchor, and now, facing execution for a crime Emma was sure she didn't commit, Dakota was still trying to save her. A gust of wind rattled the barn doors, snapping Emma out of her reverie. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through old photos. Rachel and Dakota at the county fair. Emma perched in the saddle. Dakota's proud, intelligent gaze fixed on the camera. With every image, a new determination hardened inside her. But there was a secret she hadn't shared. The vet had called last week. Dakota's cough was more than old age. It was cancer. "Inoperable," the vet had said gently, stroking Dakota's neck. "Maybe a few good months left if you're lucky." Emma had sat in the barn that night, arms wrapped around Dakota's neck, sobbing into his mane. She'd wanted to tell Rachel, she still did, but now with everything at stake, would the truth shatter her mother's last bit of strength? Or would it give her the courage to keep fighting? She pressed her forehead to Dakota's. "We're not giving up. Not now, not ever." Dakota let out a slow breath, as if in agreement. The rest of the day passed in a haze. Emma busied herself mucking stalls, cleaning tack, doing anything to outrun the ache in her heart. Her phone buzzed with news updates. Each headline another gut punch. Countdown to Turner execution. Condemned woman's final wish. One last visit with her horse. There were photos, too. Grainy shots of the barn, Rachel in chains, Dakota's wild eyes. Late in the afternoon, as the sun slanted low, Emma sat on the fence and watched Dakota graze, moving with slow deliberation. She tried to imagine life without him, but the thought was unbearable. She remembered what Rachel always said after the fire. "We survived for a reason. There's always a reason." Emma reached for her phone and called the vet again. "I want another opinion," she said. "I'm not giving up on him. Or my mom." As the sky blushed pink, Emma promised Dakota, "We're going to figure this out. I swear to you, boy, whatever you were trying to tell us last night, we'll find it." Dakota raised his head, eyes meeting hers, and for a moment, Emma felt the old magic between them. The bond forged in fire, tempered by loss, stronger than death. That night, as she lay in bed, Emma replayed the reunion in the barn. The way Dakota wouldn't let go of Rachel's vest, the look of fierce hope in her mother's eyes. She wondered what secrets the past still held, what clues they might have missed. One thing was certain: Emma wasn't done fighting. For her mother, for Dakota, for the truth. And in the deep, silent dark, with the old halter resting beside her pillow, Emma whispered into the night, "We're not alone. Not as long as we have each other." Miles away from Stonebridge, in the heart of Denver's oldest neighborhood, Detective Marcus Reed sat hunched over a battered table, surrounded by the fading glow of a single lamp. It was late, almost dawn, but he hadn't slept. Not really. A week's worth of stubble itched along his jaw. The only sounds in his apartment were the steady tick of an old clock and the shuffle of case files as Marcus methodically went through them, page by page. He'd told himself for years that Rachel Turner's conviction was airtight. The forensic evidence, the damning testimony, the watch found at the crime scene, all of it pointed to guilt. But guilt had begun to gnaw at Marcus, souring his coffee, haunting his dreams. He remembered Emma Turner as a teenager, wild with grief and rage, shouting at him on courthouse steps, "You're wrong. My mom would never hurt anyone." And Marcus, young, ambitious, confident, had turned away, thinking she'd understand one day. Now he wasn't so sure. He flipped through the old files, legal pads bristling with notes and highlighter marks. The phone records didn't sit right with him. Call times that overlapped, numbers that didn't match Rachel's known contacts. There was a witness statement he'd dismissed at the time, from an elderly neighbor who insisted she'd seen a man lurking near the barn the night of the murder. A man with a limp. That detail, so small, had vanished under the weight of the prosecution's case. Marcus rubbed his temples and stared at the evidence inventory. The hairs collected from the vest pocket, he realized, had never been tested for DNA. Budget cuts, they'd said. There was also something odd about the missing watch, the one Rachel swore she hadn't seen before the night everything fell apart. Its band had been torn. He remembered the technician's note. Leather band snapped, fragment possibly missing. That fragment was never found. Suddenly, the room felt colder. Marcus stood, pacing. Had they rushed the case? Had he let his certainty cloud his judgment? He replayed the warden's announcement from the news, heard again the tremble in Emma Turner's voice as she begged for mercy for her mother. And then there was the story about the horse. Dakota's strange behavior at the prison, fixated on Rachel's vest. The press had eaten it up, condemned woman's final visit with her hero horse. But Marcus sensed there was more to the animal's agitation than grief. He picked up his phone, dialing the number for the district attorney's office, but hung up before it rang. No. He needed more, hard evidence. If he brought this forward now, he'd be ridiculed, maybe even fired. Still, he couldn't shake the memory of Dakota, the scar on the horse's flank, the haunting loyalty in his eyes. Meanwhile, at Emma's ranch, Dawn found her sleepless too. Dakota stood outside her window, head low. He hadn't touched his grain. Emma sighed, feeling the weight of two impossible burdens, her mother's fading hope and Dakota's secret struggle. She carried the vest outside, letting Dakota sniff it, searching for any sign or clue. Dakota's ears pricked. He nosed the pocket again, then the torn lining. Emma reached inside, her fingers brushing against the frayed edge where the watchband had fallen out the night before. She frowned, holding the vest up to the light, wishing for answers. In Denver, Marcus pulled the box of evidence from his closet, dust motes dancing in the beam of the lamp. He slipped on latex gloves and opened the bag with the watch, the leather band. He examined it, hands steady, heart pounding. If Rachel hadn't owned the watch, and the torn band was missing, what if it was planted? His phone buzzed with a news alert. Turner execution scheduled for midnight. The clock was ticking. Marcus forced himself to breathe. He dug deeper, rereading the old crime scene reports, the photos. There, a shot of Rachel's vest, lying on a chair in the background, untouched by the forensics team. He scanned the property list again. Something was missing. Rachel's old stopwatch, the one she wore every day before the arrest. It was never logged as evidence. A chill ran down Marcus's spine. He needed answers, and he needed them fast. Back at the ranch, Emma sat in the paddock, Dakota's head in her lap. The old horse let out a deep sigh, warm breath fogging the cool air. Emma whispered, "I wish you could talk, boy. I wish you could tell me what happened that night." Dakota shifted, eyes closing, as if he could remember everything. The fire, the terror, the taste of smoke and fear. Emma closed her eyes too, letting the silence fill her. Suddenly, her phone vibrated, a number she didn't recognize. "Hello?" she answered, voice raw. "Emma Turner? This is Detective Marcus Reed. I need to talk about your mother's case." Emma's heart skipped. She listened as Marcus explained the missing evidence, the doubts gnawing at him. "Your horse," he said finally. "He keeps going after that vest for a reason. I think the answer's there. I'm coming out. Don't lose hope yet." After the call, Emma clung to Dakota, tears running hot down her cheeks. She felt a tiny, fragile spark flicker to life. Maybe, just maybe, they still had time. In Denver, Marcus grabbed his badge, locked his apartment, and set off into the rising sun. He didn't know what he'd find, or if it would be enough. But one thing was clear. He'd spent years trying to forget Rachel Turner's eyes, her daughter's accusations. Now he had to make it right, whatever the cost. As the day began, the case, Rachel's life, reopened. Doubt, long buried, had finally cracked the surface. Somewhere, Dakota nickered softly, sensing that hope, like the morning light, was returning at last. By late afternoon, Stonebridge Correctional Facility bristled with an intensity that made the guards snap at each other and the prisoners grow quiet in their cells. News vans clustered at the gates, their satellite dishes reaching into the sky like skeleton fingers. Headlines crawled across screens. Turner execution hours away. Will last-minute evidence save a life? Inside the Turner ranch, Emma's hands shook as she guided Dakota into the battered trailer. His hooves thudded against the ramp, nerves making him dance sideways. The old horse was keyed up, breath coming fast, eyes rolling toward the worn vest Emma had draped across a hay bale inside. She'd barely slept, replaying Detective Marcus Reed's call all night. His voice urgent, the word evidence echoing in her mind. Dakota pawed at the vest, lips searching the lining again, more frantic now than ever. Emma reached into the pocket, her fingers brushing the rough edge where the torn leather had been. She pulled the vest open, shaking it, and out fluttered a tiny strip of cracked leather with a metal clasp, broken, but unmistakably part of a watch band. Emma's heart pounded. "That's it, boy. That's what you were trying to tell us." Her voice was barely a whisper, tears welling as Dakota pressed his nose into her palm. She snapped a photo of the torn band, her hands trembling, and sent it to Marcus with the message, "Is this what you were looking for?" She didn't wait for a reply before swinging into the truck. Dakota shifted restlessly in the trailer, sensing the urgency as Emma gunned the engine and sped toward Denver, rain streaking down the windshield wipers thumping like a nervous heartbeat. Across the city, Detective Reed was already in the DA's office, dropping the file on the desk of District Attorney Moore. The room was all glass and chrome, and Marcus felt out of place, out of time as he pleaded his case. "There's new evidence, material evidence that was never examined, a missing watch band that may exonerate Rachel Turner, and an untested hair sample from the vest pocket." Moore frowned, skepticism creasing his brow. "Marcus, we've been down this road. The execution is scheduled. The governor's office is watching. Just look at this," Marcus insisted, showing the photo Emma had just sent. The watch band was found hidden in Rachel's vest, the same vest Dakota was fixated on. Why would she hide it there after the murder? It was planted on her. And the hair sample, it was never tested. If it doesn't match Rachel, you're killing an innocent woman. Moore hesitated. The tension in the room thickened as an aide rushed in with another message. Emma was en route, Dakota in tow. The clock on the wall ticked louder with each passing second. Back in the truck, Emma clutched the steering wheel, knuckles white. Every red light felt like sabotage. Every slow driver in front of her, another obstacle she had to defeat. She called the prison. "This is Emma Turner. I'm bringing evidence that can save my mother. You have to let us in, please." At Stonebridge, Warden Sheffield paced his office, fielding calls from the governor, from the press, from his own nervous staff. He watched the live news feed on a muted television, the headlines scrolling, "Last-ditch effort to save Turner." The clock read 6:47 p.m., 5 hours and 13 minutes until midnight. Dakota's agitation grew as Emma pulled into the visitor parking lot. He pawed the trailer floor, eyes wild, sweat darkening his coat. Emma opened the door and whispered, "Easy, boy. We're here." She grabbed the vest, the watch band, and Dakota's lead, then hurried inside, guards rushing to meet her. The prison's waiting room was a swirl of motion. Lawyers on phones, corrections officers conferring in corners, Emma's boots squeaking on the tile. Marcus met her at the door. "Emma, you found it." He gripped her hand, eyes flicking to Dakota. "Good boy." A flurry of voices rose as Emma produced the evidence, the vest, the watch band. Marcus argued for a stay of execution, his voice ringing with the desperation of a man who finally understood what was at stake. Moore called the governor's office, pushing for an emergency injunction. Time ticked by, every second an eternity. In the small, sterile visitation room, Rachel sat behind bulletproof glass, shackles around her wrists. Her eyes widened when Emma and Marcus entered. Dakota pressed close behind. Emma pressed her hand to the glass, tears spilling over. "Mom, we found something. Something important. Dakota was trying to show us all along." Rachel's shoulders shook as she listened, relief and fear warring in her eyes. Marcus spoke quickly, explaining the new evidence, the tests being rushed at the crime lab, the governor's hesitation as the news went live. Outside, crowds gathered, supporters chanting, protesters shouting, the whole world watching as the fate of one woman hung in the balance. Finally, the call came. The execution was paused for a last-minute hearing. A gasp rippled through the room. Emma collapsed against the glass, sobbing. Rachel reached out, shackled hands pressed to her daughter's. Dakota nickered softly, eyes bright with hope. Marcus turned to the warden. "We need to move fast. Every second counts." The warden nodded, voice grave. "We'll hold off as long as we can. If the evidence clears her, I'll make sure the world knows." The news broke across the airwaves. Turner execution delayed pending new evidence. In the visitation room, hope flickered to life. Rachel locked eyes with Emma, her voice steady for the first time in days. "Don't stop now. No matter what. Don't let them take this from us." Emma nodded, determination flaring. Through the glass, Rachel pressed her palm against Emma's, Dakota leaning close, the three of them bound together in defiance of fate. The night outside was wild with thunder and lightning, but inside Stonebridge, a mother, her daughter, and a horse stood strong, united by love and by the stubborn hope that maybe, just maybe, the truth could win out after all. The world outside Stonebridge Correctional seemed to blur as night fell, city lights glimmering beneath a restless sky. Inside, the clock was the only sound, measuring out moments that felt both endless and dangerously short. A storm of activity swept through Denver's crime lab, the district attorney's office, and the small holding cell where Rachel Turner waited, hope flickering in her chest for the first time in years. Emma paced in a narrow waiting area, her hands wrapped tightly around Dakota's worn lead rope. The old horse stood with his head pressed into her shoulder, his breath slow and ragged. She could feel every ounce of his exhaustion, every shudder that moved through his body. But he wouldn't let her go. Not now. Detective Marcus Reed was everywhere at once, on the phone with lab techs, firing off emails, pacing the corridors of the DA's office with a frantic energy no one had ever seen in him before. The evidence was being re-examined in real time. The broken watch band, the strand of hair found in Rachel's vest, the long-ignored chemical stains on the fabric. It was a race with the execution clock, every minute a gamble. Rachel, meanwhile, sat behind a thick glass window, listening as an attorney relayed updates from the legal team. Every so often, she pressed her hand against the glass, as if trying to touch her daughter, to anchor herself to hope. Her eyes followed every movement Dakota made, watching as he paced and then returned to Emma's side, his attention always lingering on the vest folded neatly on the table. Emma drifted back to memories, her mother and Dakota cantering through an open field, laughter carried by the wind, the safety she'd felt as a child whenever the three of them were together. Now she squeezed Dakota's mane, voice trembling as she whispered, "You brought us this far, boy. Don't leave us now." Suddenly, Marcus rushed in, face flushed and hair disheveled, his phone pressed to his ear. "The lab just finished the first round of tests. Rachel's DNA isn't on the inside of the vest pocket. Instead, there's residue from a rare industrial cleaner. The only other DNA belongs to Dakota." Emma blinked, stunned. "Wait, the horse?" Marcus nodded, breathless. "It proves Rachel never hid the watch band herself. She wasn't even the one handling the vest after the murder. Someone planted the evidence, someone who had access to both the stable and the cleaning supply closet." That cleaner, it's used in a local auto shop. Emma's mind raced. Tom Grady, he's the one who always fought with Mom. He threatened her after she blew the whistle on his business. Her voice hardened, memory sharp as broken glass. Marcus was already dialing. I'll get the police on Grady's last known address. If he's guilty, he might run. Emma knelt, burying her face in Dakota's mane, tears flowing freely now, not just of fear, but of hope. Dakota's persistence had forced them to look deeper, and the pieces were finally falling into place. A sudden commotion in the lab. A tech burst in, holding up a clear bag. We found horsehair embedded in the torn watch band. The band matches the watch discovered at the crime scene. There's also a partial fingerprint. Too smeared for a full ID, but it's not Rachel's. Marcus grabbed the evidence, heart pounding. Run it against Grady's file. If there's a match, we can issue a warrant and push for immediate release. Elsewhere in the facility, Rachel listened to the attorney summarize. They found new evidence in your favor. Dakota's hair, the cleaner, the torn band. It's coming together, Rachel. Her hands shook as relief mingled with disbelief. Please, just tell Emma I love her, no matter what happens. Emma stayed by Dakota, feeling his heartbeat, steady now as the worst of his agitation eased. She pressed her forehead to his and whispered, You did it. You saved Mom, just like before. The old horse stood tall, as if he understood every word, his eyes soft and proud. As the evidence mounted, the DA's office buzzed with urgency. Marcus relayed the findings to Warden Sheffield, who listened, jaw clenched. We're preparing for an emergency hearing, the warden announced. If this holds, Turner's sentence will be vacated. I want extra security on the visiting room. No press, no interference. The phone rang again. An officer had picked up Grady's trail. A traffic camera had caught his car heading west out of Denver. Police units scrambled, sirens slicing through the night. Marcus barely had time to process before the lab called back. The partial fingerprint is a match for Tom Grady, and we found receipts. He purchased the cleaner just days before the murder. Rachel's defense attorney, eyes shining with tears, relayed the news through the glass. Rachel, you're being exonerated. The real killer's name is going to court. You're going home. Rachel collapsed into her chair, sobbing, the weight of years falling away in a single moment. Thank you, she managed, eyes searching for Emma and Dakota. Emma burst into tears, hugging Dakota's neck. We did it, boy. We did it. She's coming home. Marcus stood back, watching Emma, Rachel, and Dakota, and felt a pride he'd never known. He knew the fight wasn't over. Grady was still out there, and the legal battle would rage on. But tonight, for the first time, the truth had triumphed. The old horse stood between mother and daughter, the unlikely hero at the center of a story no one would soon forget. And as the storm outside broke, washing the world clean, hope soared, carried on the back of Dakota, the horse who never gave up. Denver's courthouse never slept, but on this night, the halls thrummed with a nervous, electric energy that was different from anything the old stone building had ever known. News crews pressed against the entrance, camera lights blazing, eager to capture every second. Inside, the courtroom was packed. Attorneys shuffling files, journalists whispering, deputies stationed at every door. Emma sat in the front row, hands clenched on Dakota's worn lead rope, her knees bouncing with anxiety. Dakota stood beside her, head held high, ears flicking, as if he could sense the shifting moods all around him. Rachel, shackled and flanked by guards, was led into the courtroom. Her eyes searched the crowd, landing on Emma and Dakota. Her shoulders straightened, her gaze sharpened. It was the look of a woman who'd survived the worst. and wasn't about to back down now. Judge Warner presided at the bench, a stern woman with silver hair and piercing eyes. She glanced over the papers before her, then leveled a look at both sides. We are here on a motion to vacate the conviction and grant immediate release. The burden is on the prosecution to show cause why Miss Turner should remain in custody. The prosecution, a young, nervous assistant DA named O'Leary, rose, already sweating. Your Honor, while new evidence has been introduced, we ask for time to independently test the findings. The defense attorney, Miss Carver, shot to her feet. Respectfully, Your Honor, that is an insult to justice and to my client, who is scheduled for execution less than 2 hours from now. The state's own labs have already confirmed the findings. We have physical evidence that directly contradicts the prosecution's case. We have a witness who was overlooked. And, she nodded toward Dakota, we have the animal who uncovered that evidence. A ripple of laughter moved through the gallery, but Judge Warner silenced it with a glare. You're telling me the horse is a witness? Not in the legal sense, Your Honor. But without Dakota's actions, we would never have found the hidden watchband or the chemical traces. He led us to the truth when the system failed. Rachel's hands shook, but she met the judge's gaze, defiant. My horse saved my life. Twice. O'Leary fumbled through his notes, then blurted, even if this evidence points to another suspect, we have a confession from Miss Turner. Miss Carver shook her head. A confession made under duress, when she was denied counsel and threatened with her daughter's safety. That's not justice, Your Honor. As the lawyers argued, a commotion at the rear doors drew every eye. Deputies marched in Tom Grady, wrists in handcuffs, face ashen. His attorney trailed behind, already defeated. Judge Warner arched an eyebrow. Mr. Grady, do you understand why you're here? Grady swallowed, eyes darting to Emma, to Rachel, to Dakota. Yeah, he muttered. I get it. O'Leary stammered. We have no statement from Mr. Grady. We request. But Grady's voice cut through the room, ragged and full of resentment. I did it. I was sick of Rachel always making me look bad. She turned me into the state board, cost me my business. I never meant for things to go so far, but when I saw her vest and that damn horse, I lost it. I broke in, tried to frame her, but she wasn't supposed to take the fall. A hush fell. Emma squeezed Dakota's neck, unable to breathe. The prosecution was in shambles, scrambling for words. Judge Warner's gaze settled on the original trial judge, now seated in the gallery, a detail Marcus had flagged earlier. It has also come to this court's attention that judicial misconduct may have influenced the original conviction. The integrity of this court will not be compromised again. The room was silent except for the rhythmic stamp of Dakota's hoof on the marble floor. He stood tall, almost regal, his gaze steady on Rachel. Emma felt his strength pass into her, a living signal of hope. Carver pressed on. Your Honor, I request the immediate release of Miss Turner and the formal exoneration of her record. Judge Warner looked at Rachel, then at the trembling assistant DA. The court finds that the new evidence is overwhelming, and that Miss Turner is not only innocent, but a victim of grave injustice. The conviction is vacated. Miss Turner, you are free to go. The room erupted. Journalists leaping to their feet, flashbulbs exploding, Emma bursting into sobs of relief. Deputies hurried to unlock Rachel's shackles, and she staggered down the aisle into Emma's arms. Dakota nickered, pressing his head against both women, drawing them together as one family, unbroken. Rachel cupped Emma's face. We did it, baby. We survived. Emma laughed through her tears, hugging Dakota fiercely. He's the real hero. He never stopped believing. The judge, her voice uncharacteristically gentle, addressed the gallery. Let it be known, for the record, that the loyalty of one animal led to the correction of a terrible wrong. Let us hope that justice, and those who serve it, never forget to listen. As the courtroom cleared, Rachel, Emma, and Dakota walked into the warm embrace of friends, supporters, and, finally, freedom. Cameras flashed as Dakota was draped with a blue ribbon, named a community hero in front of a cheering crowd. But as the family emerged from the courthouse, Emma looked up at the sky, silent with gratitude and awe. Justice, for once, had listened, not just to words or to evidence, but to a horse's unwavering loyalty and the love that survived everything. And as night gave way to the gentle promise of dawn, the world outside felt a little lighter. Rachel Turner was free. Her daughter stood proud beside her, and Dakota, the horse who saved them both, stood tall, forever a symbol that hope could break even the darkest chains. The first days of freedom felt unreal, like living in someone else's memory, the kind where every breath tasted sweeter and every sound rang sharper. Rachel stepped out of the courthouse, blinking in the golden light, the air cool and clean after the storm. Cameras followed her every move, reporters shouted questions, and crowds pressed close. But all she saw was Emma and Dakota waiting at the curb, framed by the open sky. Dakota stood motionless, his head high, his deep brown eyes fixed on Rachel as she walked toward him, almost afraid the moment would vanish if she moved too fast. She pressed her face into his neck, breathing in his scent, letting her hands memorize the softness of his coat and the heat of his skin. Emma leaned against them both, a smile breaking through her tears. The three stood in a silent embrace, unbothered by the chaos swirling around them. It was as if the world paused, just for them. The weeks that followed were filled with interviews, paperwork, and a constant hum of visitors. Old friends, supporters, strangers who'd followed Rachel's story on the news. The ranch became a haven, flooded with flowers and cards, people bringing home-cooked meals and hugs. Yet at night, when the lights went out and the world went quiet, Rachel sometimes woke, heart pounding, certain she'd find herself back in her cell. Emma would find her standing in the dark kitchen, staring out at the paddock where Dakota grazed, just to reassure herself that this freedom was real. Dakota stayed close to Rachel, following her across the yard, his energy subdued, but his eyes always watchful. Emma knew her mother was watching him too, tracking the tired way he moved, the little cough that came more often, the way he leaned against the fence after a short trot. The vet's words echoed in both their minds. Inoperable cancer, a matter of months at best, perhaps weeks, but they filled the days with everything Dakota loved. Long, slow rides out to the edge of the property, where the Rockies loomed blue and vast. Rachel in the saddle and Emma walking beside, hand on Dakota's withers. Dakota's coat gleamed in the sunlight, but his breathing grew rougher with each outing. Rachel brushed him every night, telling him stories of their first show, the county fair, the barn fire that had changed their lives forever. Emma had a secret of her own, a growing life, the first faint swell beneath her sweatshirt, the joy and terror of it still so new she hadn't found the words to tell her mother. She stood in the barn one evening, watching Rachel whisper to Dakota, and placed her hand over her stomach. "You're going to be a big brother, old man," she murmured. "Stick around a little longer, okay?" One morning, Dakota collapsed in his stall, legs buckling as he tried to stand. Emma's cry brought Rachel running, and together they lifted his head, stroking his face, whispering love and promises. The vet came quickly, administering pain meds and helping Dakota to his feet. But the message was clear. Time was slipping away. With heavy hearts, Rachel and Emma decided to try one last surgery, not for a cure, but to ease Dakota's pain, to buy him a little more time. As the veterinarian prepared, Emma found herself brushing Dakota's belly, fingers catching on something hard, just beneath the skin near an old scar. She pressed gently and felt the edge of something foreign. "Mom, look at this," she said, voice trembling. Rachel knelt, peering at the lump. "That's right where he got hurt in the fire." The vet took a closer look and decided to x-ray the area. The results stunned everyone. Embedded in Dakota's flesh, hidden since the night of the barn fire, was a small, metallic object. During surgery, the vet carefully removed it, a charred, half-melted piece of a wristwatch, the missing evidence from the crime scene, marked with the initials TG. The room fell silent as Emma and Rachel stared at it, realization dawning. "He kept it safe all this time," Emma whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Dakota, you really are a hero." The discovery made headlines again. Hero horse solves crime. Key evidence found during surgery. The community rallied around Dakota, sending treats, blankets, and get-well cards. As he recovered, Rachel slept in the barn, unwilling to leave his side. But recovery was slow. Dakota was honored at a community ceremony on the open range at sunset. Family and friends gathered as the sun dipped behind the Rockies. A sheriff's deputy pinned a Medal of Valor to Dakota's halter, the crowd cheering as Rachel hugged his neck, her tears mixing with laughter. Even the news crews fell silent, their cameras lingering on the trio, Rachel, Emma, and Dakota, bathed in golden light. At the party afterward, Emma finally told Rachel her secret. "Mom, I'm pregnant. You're going to be a grandma." Rachel laughed, hugging Emma tight, then turning to Dakota. "You hear that, old man? You've got more family to watch over." They spent that night together in the barn, the doors open to the summer air. Dakota lying on a bed of fresh straw, Emma curled beside him, Rachel humming an old lullaby. The pain of the past lingered, but it was softened now, by freedom, by love, and by the hope of new life. Rachel knew the time would come when she would have to say goodbye to her greatest friend. But she also knew that Dakota's legacy would outlive any grief. He had saved her again and again, not just from death, but from despair. On Dakota's last night, the whole family gathered, Emma, Rachel, neighbors, friends, and the vet. They held him, whispered thanks, promised to carry his courage forward. As the stars spun overhead and the plains stretched quiet all around, Dakota drifted peacefully into sleep, Rachel's hand on his muzzle, Emma at his side. He was a hero to the end, a horse who never gave up, who carried hope like a banner, who brought a family home. And as dawn broke, Rachel whispered, "Thank you, old friend." Dakota, at peace at last, seemed to smile. The world felt wide open, the horizon shining with promise, a farewell and a beginning. The first morning after Dakota's passing arrived quietly, as if the whole world paused to honor the loss. Early sunlight painted long shadows across the paddocks, dew glistening on every blade of grass. Emma stood at the fence, her arms wrapped around herself, watching a gentle mist rise from the field where Dakota used to run. Each breath carried the scent of wild sage and fresh earth, and somewhere, a meadowlark sang, a new day, whether anyone felt ready or not. Rachel joined her, a cup of coffee cradled between trembling hands. Neither spoke for a long time. The ranch felt different, lighter and heavier all at once. Even the horses in the distance moved quietly, as if they too sensed the absence at the heart of the herd. Eventually, Rachel broke the silence. He always loved mornings like this. He'd come running just to stand in the sun. She smiled. A mix of sorrow and gratitude etched in every line of her face. He saved us all, you know. Emma nodded, wiping at her eyes. He did. I still can't believe how much he understood, Mom. Not just about us, but about everything. They walked together through the paddocks, boots sinking into the dew-soaked grass. Dakota's empty halter hung on the gate, the leather still warm from the last time Rachel held it. She ran her fingers across the brass nameplate, tracing the letters, memories flooding back, barn fires and blue ribbons, long rides at sunset, the unwavering comfort of Dakota's steady presence through every hardship. As they reached the far fence, Emma paused. You know, I think about what happened, about how close we came to losing you. If it weren't for Dakota, for the evidence he kept safe, for the way he wouldn't let us give up, I don't think we'd be standing here right now. Rachel looked out across the fields, her eyes distant. Justice isn't as strong as people want to believe. It's fragile. Sometimes it gets twisted, buried, lost. I know how lucky I am that you fought for me, that he fought for me. Not everyone gets that second chance. She let the silence stretch, then continued. I've been thinking a lot about what comes next, about how easily the system failed me, failed you. It scares me, Em. There are others out there, trapped by mistakes, by indifference. We have to do better, for them and for ourselves. Emma turned to her mother, her voice steady. You can help change things, Mom. You already have. People listen to you now. They've seen what happened, how an innocent woman almost lost her life, and how a horse's loyalty forced the world to look again. That matters. Rachel nodded, swallowing hard. I want to speak out. For justice reform, for animal rescue, for anyone who's ever felt unheard. Dakota's story isn't just about us. It's about how small acts, like his insistence with the vest, your faith in him, can ripple out, changing everything. Emma's hand went unconsciously to her belly, where new life stirred. He taught us about loyalty, didn't he? About never giving up, no matter how hopeless it seems. Even when he was sick, he never stopped fighting for us. A breeze rustled through the grass, carrying the low, steady sound of the ranch waking up. Horses nickering, chickens scratching, the world slowly moving forward. Rachel smiled at the familiar chaos, feeling Dakota's presence everywhere. He was more than a horse, Em. He was our healer, my anchor. He brought me back from the edge, again and again. They sat on the split-rail fence, legs dangling, soaking up the sunlight and the peace. For a moment, neither spoke. The loss was still raw, a sharp ache beneath every thought. But with it came gratitude, deep, humbling, unshakable. Rachel finally broke the quiet. What do you think people will remember when all this fades from the news? Emma thought for a long moment. I hope they remember how justice almost failed, and how it took someone with no voice, someone everyone overlooked, to set it right. I hope they remember the power of loyalty, how one horse's love for his family made people listen. Rachel nodded. And that resilience is possible, even after trauma, even when everything seems broken. We survived, not because we're strong all the time, but because we kept moving forward. Because we had each other. And because Dakota never let us give up. They talked through the morning, sharing memories, funny stories from Dakota's younger days, the quiet comfort he brought on the hardest nights, the lessons he taught without ever speaking a word. Rachel grew thoughtful. There's danger in indifference, Em. Detective Reed told me how close he came to ignoring his doubts, to letting things slide. One small decision, and everything would have been lost. It's a reminder to never look away. Never assume you know the truth until you've listened, really listened. Emma squeezed her hand. Marcus did the right thing in the end. He's got his own scars, but he made it right. That matters. And so did you, Rachel said, pulling her daughter close. You believed when I couldn't. You stood up, even when it hurt. I hope you know how proud I am. They walked back to the barn, hearts aching and full. The day stretched ahead, busy with chores and visitors and the slow work of healing. But everything felt changed, as if Dakota's spirit had settled over the ranch, a gentle, watchful presence. Before heading inside, Rachel lingered at the paddock. She placed her hand on the gate, her voice soft. Thank you, old friend. We'll carry your lessons forever. And as the morning sun climbed higher, two women stood together, wounded but unbroken, forever changed by a horse who loved them enough to save them both. Sunrise found the Turner Ranch bathed in soft gold. The air was crisp and new, carrying the scent of wildflowers and hay. Rachel stood at the edge of the paddock, a mug of coffee warming her hands, watching the horses graze. Beside her, Emma leaned on the fence, her face serene, her hand resting on the gentle curve of her growing belly. They stood in companionable silence, the horizon stretching out before them, wide open, limitless. Dakota's resting place under the old oak by the pasture was marked with a simple stone. Rachel had etched the words herself, Dakota, beloved friend, true hero. Wildflowers grew thick around it, tended by Emma's careful hands. Sometimes at dawn, deer wandered close, pausing as if to pay their respects. Life moved forward in subtle, hopeful ways. Rachel was learning to live outside the boundaries of fear. Sometimes she still woke in the night, heart racing, haunted by memories of Stonebridge, the clang of metal doors, the suffocating walls, the threat of injustice always looming. But more and more those shadows were replaced by gratitude for the grass beneath her feet, the warmth of Emma's embrace, the gentle memories of Dakota that drifted through her days. Emma's pregnancy grew more obvious as the weeks passed. The news had brought a renewed sense of purpose, a future to plan for, a life to nurture. She often found herself talking to her unborn child, sharing stories of the horse who saved their family, the lessons learned in hardship, and the power of faith when everything seemed lost. Rachel became a voice for change, sharing her story across the country. She spoke at conferences on criminal justice reform, appeared on television panels, and met with lawmakers who'd followed her case. She told them about the day she almost lost her life, about the fragile nature of justice, and about Dakota, the horse who saw what everyone else missed. Her words sparked change, inspiring new policies for evidence review and animal-assisted therapy in prisons. She urged everyone to fight for those who had no voice, to look beyond the obvious, to believe in redemption. Dakota's story spread even farther. He was posthumously awarded the Medal of Valor, the first horse in the state's history to receive such an honor. The ceremony was held at sunset on the ranch, with friends, family, and neighbors gathered beneath strings of glowing lights. As the medal was placed on Dakota's halter, now draped over his memorial stone, there wasn't a dry eye in the crowd. Local schools began to teach Dakota's story, about the animal who uncovered the truth and brought hope where there was none. Children drew pictures of him and sent letters to Rachel, calling her the bravest lady we know. A mural of Dakota appeared on the side of the county library, painted by a local artist who'd been inspired by Emma's courage. The ranch itself became a place of healing. Emma opened its gates to others, Veterans battling PTSD, children recovering from trauma, families in need of sanctuary. She and Rachel worked side by side, introducing people to the other horses, telling Dakota's story as a reminder that healing is possible, even after deep wounds. Rachel often found herself at Dakota's grave, talking quietly to the old friend who'd changed everything. She told him about the new foal born that spring, about Emma's laughter, about the way the community had come together around their family. She promised to keep fighting, for justice, for compassion, for every Dakota who went unnoticed and unappreciated. One crisp morning, as Rachel watched the sunrise, she addressed the listeners of her story directly, her words echoing across the digital airwaves. If you've followed our journey, I hope you take something with you. Justice isn't a given. It's something we have to fight for every day, especially for those who can't speak for themselves. Don't ignore the quiet heroes, the animals, the children, the overlooked, the forgotten. Listen with your heart, and be the person who steps up when others turn away. She paused, wiping a tear from her cheek. I urge you to reflect on your own life. Who are your Dakotas? Who stands by you, silently loyal, believing in you when no one else will? Maybe it's a friend, a parent, a teacher, or a beloved pet. Don't take them for granted. Tell their stories. And when you see injustice, don't look away. Take action. You never know how powerful one voice or one act of loyalty can be. Emma joined her, placing an arm around Rachel's shoulders. We're proof that hope survives, Emma said softly, that love can break chains, that healing is real. If you want to honor Dakota, help someone who needs it. Stand up for what's right. Rescue an animal, volunteer at a shelter, support a neighbor in trouble. That's how we keep his legacy alive. Together they watched the horses graze, the sunrise promising new beginnings. The family was forever changed, scarred but strong, defined not by what they had lost, but by the love and courage they had found. The story ended with Dakota at peace, his memory woven into every corner of the ranch, every smile, every sunrise. Rachel whispered, "Thank you, old friend," one last time. And as the world turned, the Turner family invited listeners, you, to carry the story forward, to like and follow their channel, to share tales of loyalty and redemption, and to become a quiet hero in your own life. Because the quiet heroes are everywhere. Sometimes they just need someone to notice.